Tupac Shakur was an American rap and hip hop artist, actor, and activist who rose to fame in the early 1990s and is considered a legend in the hip hop and rap world. I've listened to Tupac for the longest time, memorizing many of the lyrics of his songs, and also used to listen to his music with my teammates before rugby games back in college. And the track we would listen to the most is no surprise, Hit 'Em Up. That was the track of choice that blared through the speaker while we were getting ready to head out to the field. And we would run out to the field pretty pumped up with a feeling of disdain towards our opponents, but also towards those who Tupac was targeting on the track, including Mobb Deep and Biggie and the Bad Boy label, which ironically didn't stop us from listening to their music. And if you've heard the song, you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about his life from the book I read, which is called Tupac Shakur, the Authorized Biography by Staci Robinson. So I want to start off with a bit of background on Tupac's mother. Her name is Afeni Shakur, and just a brief history leading up to his birth. So Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, she was a member of the Black Panther Party in New York. Now, the Black Panther Party were a political organization advocating for things like decent housing, exemption from military service, while also protecting black neighborhoods from police brutality that became more prominent, that really increased during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Now, the Black Panther Party were one of many groups the FBI deemed as being subversive and a threat to the internal security of the United States. I had to look up what subversive means, but it refers to actions, ideas, or people that secretly try to undermine, destroy, or overthrow established institutions, governments, or belief systems. That's the definition that I got when I googled subversive. And so the book starts out with a raid on Afeni Shakur's apartment on April the 2nd, 1969. And she's taken in and she's put in a detention center, and she's charged with 20 other Black Panther members with conspiracy to commit a terrorist attacks. Apparently there were plans to blow up the New York Police Department and other public buildings in New York City. Charges. So she's in a detention center while preparations are underway for the trial, which would later become known as the Panther 21 trial. And at the conclusion of this trial, it would be the longest and most expensive in New York State Supreme Court history. Now, she's in a detention center for 10 months. After 10 months, on the 31st of January 1970, she's released on bail. The Panther 21 trial, then begins a couple of days later on February the 2nd. And while she's on bail, she has two short relationships with a Billy Garland, which is short-lived, and then another one with Kenneth Saunders. And so those are two short relationships. She continues a relationship with Kenneth Saunders later in the book, but I'm not going to go into detail here. But she falls pregnant, and then on February the 8th, 1971, while she's 5 months pregnant, the judge revokes her bail because two of her co-defendants jumped bail, and so she's sent back to prison 5 months pregnant. Now, long story short, the book goes into detail about the trial. There's a lot to cover in the book, so I'm not going to go into detail here, but long story short, the trial ends with charges being dropped against 8 of the 21, and then the 13 remaining are found not guilty. And so on the 3rd of May 1971, Afeni Shakur is released from prison, and then just over a month later, on the 16th of June 1971, Tupac is born. And so for a long time, Afeni was a target of law enforcement and therefore didn't trust him, and by extension the government. And so this instilled in Afeni her drive to educate her son, for her son to educate himself, to be aware of his surroundings. And one of the most important lessons she instilled in him was to trust nobody. And so during his infancy and toddler years, Tupac and his family, his mother Afeni and her sister Sachuya, who was born from another relationship his mother had, not the two men that I mentioned earlier. So their family had moved between crowded tenement apartments in the Bronx and Harlem, and occasionally living with his Aunt Jean. Now, the conditions of the apartments they lived in were pretty poor. One apartment they lived in had a very bad infestation of rats, some of them the size of possums. Can you imagine that? Rats the size of possums. Now, in this same apartment, the author says this of Tupac's room: the floor was covered with a greenish-blue turf-like carpet, and thin plywood walls were the only thing separating Tupac from the cold air of the Black Alley. Now, I mentioned that they moved between crowded tenement apartments. Some of you might not know what they are, but if you watched the TV show Friends, there's a tenement apartments, but I can imagine the ones Tupac and his family used to live in weren't as luxurious as those. So just those big block buildings that are just separated into smaller apartments. For a while, Tupac slept on a mattress on the floor with no sheets, and he only had 2 pairs of pants and a sweater. During his infancy, he lived in a 3-bedroom apartment with his Aunt Jean's family, who has 5 kids, so it was pretty crowded. They barely had any food, and most of their clothes were torn. They relied on block welfare cheese, which is just a big block of processed cheese provided by the government in the 1980s, when there was a surplus of dairy. Many times Tupac would just eat hot sauce sandwiches. He'd just grab 2 pieces of bread, a bit of Tabasco, maybe a bit of sweet chili, and he'd just have that as a sandwich. Apparently it was one of his favorites. So these conditions were not conducive to bringing up children, very poor conditions. And what compounded all of this was Afeni's drug use. It really compounded. It took a toll. When his family and his Aunt Jean's family moved to a 2-story, 5-bedroom apartment, his Aunt Jean found it unacceptable to live with her sister, Afeni, Tupac's mother, who was addicted to crack cocaine. And so Tupac's family had to move out. And Tupac references his mother's drug use in his song Dear Mama. If you recall the lyrics, I'm going to say them here. And even as a crack fiend, mama, he always was a black queen, mama. So that's what he was referring to. And that really took a toll, really compounded the poverty and the conditions that they were living in. Sometimes Tupac would come home from school and find that there was no power. And this is what he says: I used to sit outside by the streetlights and read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it made it so real to me that I didn't have any lights at home, and I was sitting outside on the benches reading this book. But even though they lived in poverty, Tupac and his sister were rich in exposure to the arts. As a toddler, he was given real bongo drums, and he would listen to his mum's record collection. His mum would sing him to sleep, and he and his sister would often practice dance routines in the bedroom they shared. This is Tupac we're talking about. He used to practice dance routines. During his preteen years, he was given a boombox, and he spent hours listening to music, right? No surprise. He spent hours listening to music, and he was studying lyrics from artists such as LL Cool J, Eric B. and Rakim, and Run DMC. When Tupac was in trouble, his mum would punish him by getting him to read the New York Times aloud from front to back, which would obviously expand his vocabulary. He was taught the Japanese form of poetry called haiku. Not the YouTube haiku compilations, that's something else. But he would be fascinated by haiku, and he would write lots of haiku to express his feelings, and also about being a future freedom fighter. As a teenager, he was already an avid reader, right? He's very articulate as a rapper. Surprise, surprise. As a teenager, he was an avid reader. This is what the author says. At 14, Tupac was an avid reader of the local daily newspapers. Crime statistics, political debates, Reaganomics, and global issues filled his young mind. For Tupac, reading the news was an emotional experience, whereas most people might skim the paper and shake their heads at the sad news and tragic stories. Tupac was deeply affected, And later on in the podcast, you'll hear about how Tupac bases one of his most iconic songs on a story he read from the newspaper that deeply affected him, really deeply affected him. In 1984, in early 1984, while living with his Aunt Jean and her kids, Tupac's cousins, he starts to tag along with his cousin Scott to a theatre program creating stage productions. He would usually just sit where the audience sits and just watch the actors perform and watch them on the stage, right? And so Tupac was influenced by this. He sort of watched and was really interested in what they were doing. Later on, the theatre group were preparing for a production of the play A Raisin in the Sun to be performed at the Apollo Theatre to help fundraise for Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign that year. And there was a need for a child actor for one of the parts. Now, just to note, Jesse Jackson was an American civil rights activist who just passed away last month. But so they're preparing for this play. There's a need for a child actor for one of the parts. Who would play the part? Scott suggests his cousin, Tupac. Tupac plays the part. He absolutely kills it. No stuttering, no nothing. He was phenomenal. And his whole family were proud. And this is the birth of Tupac's dream of wanting to become an actor. This is what he says later on. I caught the bug, but I really enjoyed expressing myself. And any time I can express myself, I can let some of the pain go from a childhood like mine. So what he's saying there is that he used acting to relieve the pain from the poverty and living conditions that he was experiencing at the time. Later that year in 1984, his family moves to Baltimore, and if I recall correctly, that move to Baltimore was from their Aunt Jean kicking, not kicking, I wouldn't say kicking, but asking Afeni, her sister, to move out because of her drug use. So they moved to Baltimore in 1984, and this is where Tupac's love for the spoken word goes to another level. His first rap name, like listen to this, his first rap name was Casanova Kid. And then later on he changes it to MC New York. Right, when I first read that, I was like, that's so weird, but it's because we don't have any mental associations with those names. But those are Tupac's first rap names, Casanova Kid and MC New York. Doesn't hit the same as Tupac. He becomes so good at 13, he's offered a recording contract. But his mum says no, because he's too young, and he's absolutely shattered by it, and he cries. In 1986, a pivotal moment, we're skipping ahead now. In 1986, a pivotal moment occurs in Tupac's life. Now he's got dreams of becoming an actor, as we heard. He applies to attend the Baltimore School of Arts, which is a public high school specializing in the performing and visual arts. And at the time, each year, there are about, on average, 250 applicants who apply to attend Baltimore School of Arts. And only 18 are selected, so very slim chances. And Tupac decides to apply. The book goes into detail about how he had no qualms about his chances. He was confident enough that he was going to make it. And guess what happens? He applies, he auditions, and he is selected to attend BSA. At BSA, he starts to delve deeply into his creative side in acting, music, reading, etc. He would sometimes spend 12 hours a day at school rehearsing. He was a voracious reader, reading Shakespeare, the philosophers Plato and Socrates, books like Moby Dick and Catcher in the Rye. And he would be deeply influenced by the book The Prince by the Italian author and philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, which basically says, the premise of the book The Prince says that a ruler should maintain and extend their power by any means. Later, Tupac would record his last album before he died under the stage name Machiavelli, as a nod to Niccolò Machiavelli. Now, one time, listen to this. This is, I want to say it's crazy, but it's just very surprising. One time, Tupac, to stay in touch with his feminine side, he painted his fingernails black. And this is a conversation between Tupac and his mum. "What's with the black nail polish?" Afeni asked one afternoon when Tupac came home from school. "Oh yeah, this," he responded, staring at his fingers as he held them out in front of himself. "That's just so I can stay in touch with my feminine side." "What do you know about a feminine side?" "Everything you taught me, and I don't want to forget about it. So this is a constant reminder." Listen, this is the same guy who wrote "Hit 'Em Up," the greatest diss track of all time. He painted his fingernails as a teenager to stay in touch with his feminine side, right? Being gangster doesn't actually mean what we think it is, right? It's a bit different. For an acting assignment, Tupac choreographed a solo dance movement, Dance, to Don McLean's song called Vincent, which is about Vincent van Gogh. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing Vincent's last name properly, but I'm just going to say Go for now. And so Tupac, for an acting assignment, he choreographs a slow movement dance to that song called Vincent by Don McLean. And it's a song he first heard when his mum had purchased Don McLean's American Pie album on vinyl. Now, for those who don't know who Don McLean is, he sings the song American Pie. Surely you know that song. But he loved that song Vincent so much, he references it in his music videos. I know he references it in the music video for the song "Do for Love," which is one of my favorite songs. If you remember the music video for "Do for Love," the opening scene it's an animated music video, and the opening scene opens with a backdrop of Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night painting. I recommend if you want to know what I'm talking about, go on YouTube and watch the music video "Do for Love." Great song, one of my favorites as well. While he's at Baltimore School of Arts, Tupac makes some friends. There he meets Jada Pinkett Smith today, but at the time, of course, only Jada Pinkett. Well, she was Jada Pinkett back then, but she's Jada Pinkett Smith now because she's married to Will Smith, who smacked the shit out of Chris Rock at the Oscars not too long ago. And so Tupac and Jada Pinkett develop a strong friendship. They used to stay up all night debating subjects ranging from Shakespeare, Reaganomics, and Christianity. Tupac would educate Jada on Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party, and Jada would share her spiritual and metaphysical teachings that she learned from her aunts. Jada actually came up with the original idea for the music video for California Love, right? The song by Tupac and Dr. Dre. That music video, the original idea for it, the post-apocalyptic Mad Max theme, Jada Pinkett actually came up with that, right? Fun fact. He also became very good friends with a middle-class white boy by the name of John Cole. Now, John Cole was pretty well off, from a middle-class, upper-class family, so he did not experience the poverty that Tupac was living with. And so every time Tupac and John were at John's house, Tupac would eat from John's well-stocked fridge, right? This is a new thing for Tupac. He's not used to walking into a house and seeing a well-stocked fridge, at least at his house. But every time he was there, the book talks about how he would just make this. There's no need for him to make hot sauce sandwiches now, right? There's all sorts of condiments and meats and lettuces and different types of salads, right? He doesn't need to just have Tabasco in his sandwiches. He was also wearing John's sweaters, wearing his clothes. Remember, Tupac only had a couple of pairs of pants and a sweater, so he's wearing John's clothes. He and John would ride around Baltimore listening to music and smoking weed, of course, right? This is Tupac we're talking about. And they'd listen to artists such as Metallica, Tracy Chapman, and Sinead O'Connor, breaking down the meaning to their lyrics, right? These are artists outside the rap genre that Tupac is listening to while high as a kite and breaking down their lyrics, right? He's a student of the game. And also, throughout this book, there are lots of stories about Tupac smoking copious amounts of weed, sometimes after things happen there where you shouldn't be smoking weed, right? But it's Tupac, right? It's no surprise. And so life for Tupac in Baltimore is very good. a lot better than New York, but it would not be for long. Because he had dreams of becoming an actor, right? He's at BSA now. He really wants to make it. He's refining his craft. He's sharpening his sword. He starts to not pay attention in any of the classes that wouldn't help him become an actor, right? And a couple of those classes was maths and science. He didn't pay attention. He didn't do his homework. He just didn't care. And this leads to the school sending him a letter informing him that he hadn't earned enough credits to advance to the 12th grade, right? He's in 11th grade now. Doesn't have enough credits to advance to the 12th. And he was informed that he'd be placed on probation unless there were some drastic changes. Now this leads to a big argument between Tupac and his mother. And his mum says, nah, that's it. I'm sending you to California where your sister is in school. And he's absolutely shattered by this. And this is what his teacher says. He was very, very sad. Hicken recalled. I think Hicken is the name of one of his teachers. He was leaving a family. He found an identity and a support that kids there got that they didn't get at other schools. It's a school of oddballs where you can explore yourself until you find who you are. Tupac left only halfway discovering who he was and what he loved to do. And I think it's an interesting thing to say because, right, like, so Hicken's saying that, like, Tupac only left halfway discovering who he was and what he loved to do. But when we think about Tupac now, I think that was probably the best thing for him. Right, imagine if his mum did not send him to California. We might not have got the Tupac we know now. But I also think if he didn't get sent away, he would have still been a pretty successful rap artist. Maybe even a lot bigger than we know now because he would have finished his schooling at BSA. And so we're skipping ahead. He's in California now. It's 1988. And once he's there in California, this guy does not waste time. He joins a group of local aspiring rappers and they call themselves ONE, which is an acronym that stands for One Nation MCs. These guys were pretty committed. They're all wanting the same thing, getting a record deal to rap and get paid for it. They would have all-night recording sessions. They were freestyling. They were honing their craft. Iron sharpens iron. Another pivotal moment in his life is when he meets a lady by the name of Layla Steinberg. Now, she would play a pivotal moment in launching Tupac's career, but he meets this lady, Layla Steinberg. He's going for a walk one morning, and he sees Layla in a grass field reading Winnie Mandela's memoir, and Winnie Mandela is the ex-wife of Nelson Mandela. And so he's walking past, and he sees Layla really reading Winnie Mandela's memoir, and he says, "Oh yeah, that's a great book." Right? What does he imply when he says that? It means he's already read it. He's not even 18 yet, and he's well read. He's reading books by the ex-wives of the first president of post-apartheid South Africa. Right? That's how well read he is at 17. Who's also poor, living in poverty. His mum's got a crack cocaine addiction. So he has a good conversation with Layla, and this leads to Layla inviting Tupac to a poetry circle that Layla ran. And here he would improve his writing skills and he'd become more in touch with expressing his feelings, such as pain. Here's a poem he wrote called If There Be Pain. If there be pain, all you need to do is call on me to be with you. And before you hang up the phone, you will no longer be alone. Together we can never fall, because our love will conquer all. If there be pain, reach out for a helping hand, and I shall hold you wherever I am. Every breath I breathe will be into you, for without you here my joy is through. My life was lived through falling rain, so call on me if there be pain. What a great poem. Written by Tupac, called If There Be Pain. So he's part of this poetry group now, and he's honing his writing skills and his music skills. and his hard work starts to pay off. When he came to California in 1988, he attends high school. Right, his mum sent him to California not to muck around, but he attends high school. He doesn't have enough credits again to graduate at this school, and he drops out. And he drops out to pursue his rap career full time. And in Layla's poetry group, he meets a guy by the name of Ray Love, and they hit it off immediately, and they form a rap duo called Strictly Dope. I laughed because I'm wondering if these guys called their rap duo to reference their affinity for smoking weed. I would say so. But Tupac and Ray Love hit it off immediately. They formed Strictly Dope, and they started writing and recording music together. Right? This guy is serious. And he is so serious that he starts to invest in learning how to make it in the music business. He buys a book about how to make it in the music business. This is what the author says. His rap career became his life. He brought Donald Passman's book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, and studied it, focusing on the chapter titled How to Pick a Team. Following the book's prescribed steps, he assigned Layla the responsibility of being Strictly Dope's manager. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to sound me, he told her. Right, this is Tupac. He's directing this lady. And just to note, Layla's about, I think, 8 to 10 years older than Tupac. But he's so confident in his ability. He's telling Layla, who runs this poetry group, to be his manager and directing her instead of leaving the reins with Layla on how to navigate this, how to make it in the music business. Right? He's just saying, look, I've read this book and I'm going to tell you how to sound me. And right, I think his confidence, I think his intuition was correct because, you know, we know who Tupac is now. And so Layla starts to take action by looking for opportunities for Strictly Dope to get signed. And she gets in contact with a business associate by the name of Atron Gregory. I've never heard the name Atron before. I think that's a pretty cool name, Atron. But she gets in contact with Atron, and Atron is the manager of the CEO who runs a management company called TNT Management. And Layla asks Atron if she can have a look at Strictly Dope. Atron agrees and says to send him a video of Tupac and Ray Love performing. So in the back of Layla's backyard, they set up a stage, a temporary stage, and Layla records a video of Tupac and Ray Love performing. Apparently Tupac is directing it, right? No surprises. And so they send the video to Atron. Atron has a look. He's like, yep, pretty good. Before I go on, I want to tell you about Atron. He's got a good reputation. He has managed, at this point, Grammy-nominated and Grammy-winning artist. And he was also the tour manager for Eazy-E for many years. Right, Eazy-E was a member of the group NWA, which stands for N-Word with Attitude. So Atron sees this video of Tupac and Ray Love performing, and he's like, yep, cool. But he wants a second opinion, and so he gets one of his artists that he manages, Gregory Jacobs, aka Shock G, from the rap group Digital Underground, to meet with Tupac and Ray Love to see if they were legitimate or legit. And so if the name Shock G doesn't sound familiar, he features on the song I Get Around by Tupac, right? If you recall the lyrics, it didn't hit me immediately, but yeah, Shock G, he features in the song I Get Around. Right, so anyway, Shock G meets up with Tupac. Tupac's like, yo, I'm ready to perform. Tupac performs for Shock G during their meeting, and this is what Shock G says. It was street, it was educated, it was articulate, like hip-hop fantasy type stuff. A spy looking for his mic. What an interesting way to describe Tupac. Like hearing it for the first time. Hip-hop fantasy, a spy looking for his mic. Right? It's a very unusual way, obviously positive, but unusual. So after the approval of Shock G, Atron told Layla the next step would be for Tupac and Ray Love to meet the rest of the Digital Underground group, but with a caveat, and this is what Atron says. Just know that if Shock and the others like the group, that's fine, he told her. But if they like Tupac only, then that's how it's going to be. And that's exactly what happened. Weeks after he turned 18, Tupac signs a management contract with TNT Management. And just to note, a management contract and a record deal are two different things. I didn't know this, and I assumed they were when I first read it, but a management contract is where your management is shopping you around to secure an opportunity to get a record deal, and a record deal is what you really want, right? Where the label provides the financial resources to produce and distribute the music. And so from the jump, Tupac, he's hungry. From the jump, he is hungry. Tupac gets an opportunity to go on tour with Digital Underground to Japan. And so because Tupac was just signed, he hadn't recorded anything, he would be a roadie, right? He's just responsible for menial tasks such as carrying the bags. And when he's informed about his responsibilities on tour, he didn't care. This is what he says: I'll do anything. Right? This guy's hungry. Before the fame, he was just happy to be on tour, carrying the bags. So we're skipping ahead now, and we get to where Tupac gets a huge opportunity. Digital Underground were given an opportunity by actor Dan Aykroyd to make a cameo in his next movie, Nothing But Trouble, and record a couple of songs for the film's soundtrack. Right now, for those who don't know, Dan Aykroyd, I needed a reminder when I googled him, but his most famous movie is the original Ghostbusters in 1984 and the Blues Brothers movie, I think in the 90s as well, or early 2000s. I didn't see any movies that he's been in recently that would make you aware of who he is. But he's a famous actor. I would say A-lister back in the days. But anyway, so Dan Aykroyd gives Digital Underground the opportunity to make a cameo in a movie and record a couple of songs for the soundtrack. Now, Shock G gives Tupac an opportunity here to feature on one of the songs, right? And this song is called Same Song by Digital Underground featuring Tupac. They make a music video and it would be televised worldwide and broadcast on radio. And this is the first time the world will see and hear Tupac for the first time. I had to go, as part of the podcast, I had to go and watch the music video. I'm not a fan of the music, and I don't want to be too harsh on music videos back then, but I'm just not a fan of the song, right? But obviously, big fan of Tupac and all his other music, and his verse on there was pretty decent. Anyway, so they get there. So there's some success there, right? Early success for Tupac on his first featuring on the first music video, and he's now being heard on the radio. However, getting a record deal was very difficult for Tupac. His manager Atron was unsuccessful in persuading labels such as Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy didn't want Tupac, right? They have featured artists such as Coolio, Naughty by Nature, and Queen Latifah. Atron was also unsuccessful in persuading Elektra, right? Elektra has featured or has artists such as Bruno Mars and Destiny's Child. And Atron also was unsuccessful in persuading Def Jam. Right, Def Jam didn't want Tupac. Now, Def Jam is a big label, right? They have artists such as Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Rihanna. They didn't want Tupac. And so Atron gives Tupac the bad news, but it doesn't faze him, and this is what his response was. Right? He doesn't care. He's still driven. This is his response. All I want in my life is to have a record out and a movie. That's all I want. That was what he wanted. And he would get the opportunity to fulfill one of those dreams. And as we've heard, he has dreams of becoming an actor. While at BSA, he was refining his craft. So any opportunity put in front of him, he'd grab it with both hands. And the first opportunity would be to read for a role in the movie Juice, which is about 4 black youths growing up in Harlem, following their day-to-day activities, struggles with police, rival gangs, and also issues with family at home. And Tupac successfully gets the role of the film's antagonist, Bishop, one of the 4 black youths. And just to give you an idea who the other actors who were in this film, how big of an opportunity this was for Tupac. Also cast in the film were Samuel L. Jackson and Queen Latifah. And so during filming, Tupac would bring his training from the Baltimore School of Arts with him. And this is what one of the producers said: "I was more than a little surprised, to put it mildly, that Tupac was so serious about the craft of acting. I guess I assumed this guy was just a rapper that they were sticking in this movie because he sold a few records, and the headache of dealing with this on a day-to-day basis would be ours to deal with. But the truth was that this guy was a consummate pro. He was superb. He blew us all away." So look at one of the producers is absolutely blown away by his professionalism on set. Now, as I mentioned before, Tupac would read the newspaper and he would be deeply affected by what he read. Now, one day during the filming of Juice, he comes across a story of a teenage girl who threw her newborn baby down a trash chute. Now, for those who don't know, a trash chute is a vertical tube in high-rise buildings that allow residents to dispose of rubbish from any floor. Not sure we have them in New Zealand. I haven't come across them in any high-rise apartments, but that's what a trash chute is. Now, he reads that story, and he's deeply affected by it. And that story would form the basis of one of his most iconic songs, Brenda's Got a Baby. And this is what Tupac says about writing the song. "It was in my trailer while we were filming Juice," Tupac recorded. "In between shots, I wrote it. I was crying too. That's how I knew everybody else would cry, because I was crying. It takes a lot to move me. But I was in tears because this little black girl was all by herself, and the next page, I'm hearing about little debutantes and shit. That shit was just getting to me too much." Now, debutante is a term, I had to look this up. Debutante is a term to describe a young woman of aristocratic or upper-class family background who has reached maturity and is presented to society. Now, I didn't know that. I thought that debutante just means when you play your first game in sport, but it also means that. And so what he's talking about here is the contrast between those two stories, which is is typical, right? It's a newspaper. They evoke contrasting emotions. But anyway, Juice goes on to be a successful film. Tupac is lauded for his performance. The New York Times, the newspaper that Tupac used to read as punishment from front to back, they call Tupac the film's most magnetic figure. The film also is successful at the box office. It cost $5 million to make, and it goes on to make $20 million. So Tupac has ticked off one of his life goals, which is to be in a film. Now what's left is for Tupac to release a record. And to release a record, he needs a record deal, and this is the story. Now, a man named Tom Wally at the time is a major figure in the music industry. He worked in the mailroom. I'm just going to give you a little history on Tom Wally. Tom Wally started in the mailroom at Warner Brothers Records and worked his way up to the A&R department. A&R stands for Artists and Repertoire, and it's the department responsible for scouting talent assigned to the label. He then works at Capitol Records, where he signed the Australian-New Zealand band Crowded House, right? Who are most known for their a great song, "Don't Dream It's Over." Right, so Tom Wally was partly responsible for signing Crowded House to Capitol Records. After his time at Capitol Records, he leaves due to disagreements about how the company should be run. He leaves Capitol Records and he wants to start his own record company, and so he teams up with three men. The first one is Tim Field, who's a film producer, and just to note, just for your sake, remember Tim Field's the one with the money. He's a film producer. John McClane, who's a music industry veteran, and Jimmy Irvine, music producer. You probably heard of him before. He later works with Dr. Dre, and they are successful in selling Beats by Dre to Apple. So these four men, Tom Whalley, Tim Field, John McClane, and Jimmy Irvine, they form Interscope Records. And this is what the author says was the goal of Interscope. Rather than focus on genre, they sought to fill their roster with quality artists who could give listeners a glimpse into their lives, maybe sometimes even their souls. They sought out unconventional storytellers. Tupac, is he an unconventional storyteller? You're damn right. We took extreme artists and gave them freedom and then had the mainstream come to them instead of compromising the artists to get the mainstream, Wally said. Now, what is he saying here, right? The standard is back then, what he's implying by saying that is that record companies get an artist, and what do? They compromise them so the mainstream comes to them. They compromise them for the mainstream, for the liking of the mainstream. What Tom Whalley is saying here, we take extreme artists and give them freedom, and then the mainstream comes to them. Right, and this is also good for an artist because the last thing you want is to sign to a record deal and then have your work compromised. You have to change for the sake of to keep the shareholders happy, right? So it's an interesting take, revolutionary, right? Revolutionary approach at the time, and would prove to be a very successful one. And so Achon gets in contact with Tom Whalley and gives Tom Whalley Tupac's demo. Tom listens to Tupac's demo and he's like, yep, I like this guy. Then Tom gives Tupac's demo to Ted Field, and here the author describes Ted's routine for listening to demos. Field's routine for listening to demos was to put the cassette into his car stereo while he drove. If he didn't like it, he'd fling the tape into the back seat and pop in another. Tupac's demo never saw the back seat. Instead, it found its way into the hands of Field's 12-year-old daughter, Danielle, who listened to rap and would, Field knew, give a more objective opinion. She loved it. Right, so Ted Field's daughter approves, Ted Field's 12-year-old daughter, Danielle, approves, and that gave Ted Field the approval that was needed, right? So when I read this, I was thinking, what the difference between Tupac getting his record deal and not getting his record deal was a 12-year-old girl, white girl, right? But she obviously listens to rap, and she was like, yeah, this guy's legit. And so after Ted Field's approval and his daughter's approval and Tom Whalley's approval, Tupac would have dinner with Tom Whalley and Ted Field, and they tell him he's going to be the first rap artist signed to Interscope. And on August the 15th, 1991, it was official. Tupac becomes the first rap artist signed to Interscope, and he's only 20 years old. And so since Interscope was a relatively new label and mostly invested in rock and pop artists, they didn't have the marketing and promotions infrastructure to launch a rap artist. And so without that infrastructure, without the wherewithal to promote Tupac's debut album, the book says it would almost be impossible to break an artist. And so Tom Whalley has to go to another record label, Atlantic Records, who had this infrastructure set up to help promote Tupac's album. But to Tom's surprise, they were not sold on Tupac, right? Here's another label that's not sold on Tupac. So without Atlantic Records' help, Tom Whalley thought that he might have to be released from his record deal. But Ted Field, remember I said the one with the money, he had another idea. He would provide the financial backing to do whatever it was required to launch Tupac's career. This is the conversation between Tom Whalley and Ted Field. But Field had another idea. He asked Whalley if he liked the album. Whalley said yes. Well, I like the record too. Do you believe in Tupac? Of course I do. I believe in him too. Field's belief also meant his financial backing. He had the personal means to market any Interscope artist that Atlantic didn't feel confident in supporting. You're a smart guy. Figure it out, Field said. Just tell me how much money you need. So these guys really believed in Tupac, right? And I think it comes back to their goal of Interscope was just to get unconventional storytellers, sign them to the label, give them as much freedom as they need, and then the mainstream will come to them because you're not compromising their work. And so skipping ahead, Tupac's debut album, Tupacalypse Now, is released just 3 months after he signed with Interscope. The album, most of the music on it reflects his activism side, and Tupac says his music is a mirror reflection of black culture in the early 1990s, with some of the core ideas being the struggle of the young black male, systemic injustice and police harassment, advocacy for black women as portrayed in the song Brenda's Got a Baby. And some of these songs caused public outcry. In September 1992, US Vice President at the time, Dan Quayle, labels Tupac's album as having no place in our society and accusing Interscope and its parent company, Time Warner, of committing an irresponsible act. Now, these statements were due to high crime rates at the time, being blamed on rap music that expressed anger toward law enforcement. Remember, I think is it late 80s or early 90s, the NWA released a song called F the Police. Those statements were also made because around that time in Texas, a state trooper was shot and killed by a 19-year-old during a traffic stop. The defense lawyers for the 19-year-old claimed that he was influenced by the lyrics from Tupac's album. And also in 1992, it was election year, and so Dan Quayle and his president George H.W. Bush advocated for family values, and they tried to rein in gangster rap. But Tupac disagreed. He didn't think his music promoted violence. He said it's just a reflection of life right now in general for people of color, and in particular for African Americans. And so what does Tupac do in response? He does something about it. He responds by creating a thug life. And this is what the author says. His plan was to embrace people whom America labeled as thugs and flip the negative connotation of the word, just as some in the black community had reclaimed the N-word, N-I-G-G-E-R, by altering the spelling to N-I-G-G-A. He would turn the negative implication to one of belonging and pride. And this is what Tupac says. When I say I live the thug life, baby, I'm hopeless, one person might hear that and just like the way it sounds, but I'm doing it for the kid that really likes a thug life and feels like it's hopeless. So Tupac creates thug life, but there is some skepticism and pushback from some of his supporters. And so he's asked to define in detail what thug life actually is, what's the purpose of this initiative, so it's seen in a more positive light rather than the negative connotation that the word thug is already associated with. And so with the help of Mutulu Shakur, one of Tupac's stepfathers, the book goes into detail about his time and how he's involved in Tupac's life. I think, yes, if I recall correctly, Mutulu Shakur is the father of Shachuya, his sister Shakur. Yes, so Mutulu Shakur is his stepfather. So with the help of Mutulu Shakur and some OGs, original gangsters from the East and West Coast, They helped define what thug life is by writing a code for thug life, which is basically just a list of rules for the street, meaning gangsters to abide by. Right? And some of these rules, I'm just going to list some of the rules. They include old folks must not be abused, so don't harm old people. No slinging to children. Slinging, I would presume in this regard, means selling drugs. So no slinging to children. No children slinging, meaning no children selling drugs. No shooting at parties, and protect yourself at all times. It sounds like something a referee would say in a boxing match. And so in response to the criticism around Tupac's music, around his response to the criticism to his music, he does something about it, right? He's channeling his mother's Black Panther activism instead of just lying down and taking the criticism. And so you contrast his activism with his defiance against the law, or law enforcement to be more specific. Now, to say Tupac despised police is an understatement, right? There are many stories in the book about Tupac not cooperating with police and sometimes even being disrespectful towards them. Not a surprise to me when I read them. And I want to tell a story where Tupac shoots 2 police officers and gets away with it. This is a very funny story. Now, we're skipping ahead, and it's 1994, and Tupac's family, he's got a bit of money, and he buys his mother and his sister and his aunt Jean and her kids. They're living in a pretty big house, which is pretty much a small mansion in Atlanta. And so Tupac's in LA, so he'd travel back and forth between LA and Atlanta to visit his family there. Now, one time during a visit to his family in Atlanta, he visits them and he performs a concert. During the concert, a fight breaks out in the crowd, and so he has to be escorted off stage. Now, after he's escorted off stage, they head back to the hotel with his entourage in a limousine or a car, a very nice car. They're on their way to the hotel. They get outside. They pull up to the traffic lights outside the hotel. And Tupac notices what looks like a black man being assaulted by 2 white men. What does he do? He gets out of the car and he confronts the 2 white men. Then one of the men pulls a gun and points it directly at Tupac. Right? So there's one of the white men pulls a gun directly and pointing it at Tupac. What does Tupac do? First of all, what would anyone do? What would most people do in that situation? They'd back down, right? Your life's in danger. You could get killed right there. Your life could end right there. What does Tupac do? He doesn't do that, right? We're not surprised what he does. He yells at everyone in the car, saying, "Someone give me my gun." No one moves, and then he says it again, "Someone give me my gun." Now, at this point, the man used the butt of his gun to smash one of the windows in Tupac's car, and then they take off running down the street. Then Tupac goes into the car, grabs his gun, and gets on one knee, Call of Duty style. You know, in Call of Duty where you click the right joystick and you crouch. That's all he did. He got on one knee, Call of Duty style. He aims down the line and starts shooting at the 2 white men. One of the men gets shot in the abs and the other in the ass. Now what does he do? He goes back into his car and they go to the hotel. They go up to his hotel room with his entourage. Once they're up in the room, one of the entourage looks out the window and sees the 2 men being taken away by paramedics and realizes the 2 men were cops. All right. Now, his cousin Dante was there, and this is what he says. Dante couldn't believe Tupac was hosting people in his hotel room after he'd just shot 2 people outside. "I was scared to death," he recalled. "I just saw this N-word shoot 2 white people. Get my mama on the phone. I'm getting the hell out of here." And so his entourage are scared and worried. They're looking outside the window at the scene outside. What is Tupac doing? he's rolling up a blunt and he's asking everyone to be quiet so he can play his new song, which happened to be Dear Mama. Everyone's like, holy shit, what the fuck? Tupac's like, yo, everyone quiet down, listen to my new song. That's crazy. So he's rolling up, he's smoking weed in his hotel room, and then there's a knock at the door, and it's the police. And long story short, Tupac gets charged with shooting two police officers, but they're dropped, right? Because even though it was cops he shot, the cops were drunk, and the gun they used was seized in a drug bust and stolen from an evidence locker. And so he gets away with it. And there are many stories, many similar stories where Tupac would just instantly turn if he was being disrespected or someone was being done wrong in any way. This guy was not scared, not even with a gun in his face. Right? He didn't back down when there was a gun pointed at him. And it's also the case when he got shot the first time. Now let me tell you the story about that. At this point in time, Tupac and Biggie Smalls, the New York rapper, they're good friends at this point. And in the early morning of the 30th of November 1994 at 12:25 a.m., Tupac is in New York with some associates heading to a studio to rap a verse for an artist signed to Bad Boy Records, which is a label founded by P. Diddy. Now, on the way into the studio, Tupac notices a guy in camo or camouflage at the door. And this guy looks at Tupac, and then he immediately looks down to the ground, to which Tupac later said in an interview was quite weird because after he became famous, he becomes, one of the most recognized faces in the world. And so whenever he came into the vicinity of other black men, at least in America, they would either acknowledge him with respect or jealousy. But this guy just looked up and then quickly looked down. And Tupac also said at the time that he'd smoked chronic, so he didn't think anything of it. So this guy was high as a kite walking into the studio. They get past the security post and they are waiting for the lift when two young black men from behind start yelling at them to lay down and take off their jewelry while pointing guns at them. Now, let me ask you, what do you think Tupac does? Right, we've heard what he did before with the two police officers. What do you think he's going to do? He's got two guys behind him holding guns up, telling them to get on the ground with guns pointed at his back. What does he do? He turns around. He grabs the gun aimed at him and at the same time reaches for one of his own guns. Then the other robber yells, "Gun!" And the robber that pointed the gun to Tupac pulled the trigger and a flurry of shots went off. Tupac gets shot a few times. He gets pistol whipped. And he gets shot 5 times. That's what he says in the song Hit 'Em Up. And so he's pistol whipped. They take off with $40,000 of jewelry. Right, this is $40,000, $40,000 US worth of jewelry at the time. Right, this is the early 90s, so that's about $100,000 New Zealand at the time. That's a house. Tupac is wearing a small house's worth, a lot of jewelry on him. Right, a house worth of jewelry on him. Gets stolen. One of Tupac's entourage grabs Tupac's other gun because he had two. Grabbed it, went outside, tried to see where the robbers went. Couldn't find them. So they head up to the 8th floor where dozens of people are, including Biggie and P. Diddy and a lot of the Bad Boy Record staff. They're up there on the 8th floor. This is after he's got shot. He doesn't go straight to the hospital from there. He goes up there, and the book doesn't say anything about a conversation between Tupac and the staff, the Biggie and P. Diddy. Apparently, he just got on the phone and called 111. So skipping ahead, Tupac has surgery, and he has surgery in hospital, makes a full recovery. And he starts to question everyone around him. He suspects those at the studio that night, including Biggie and Diddy. He thinks that they knew who shot and robbed him. He also becomes super depressed and suicidal. At one point, he's sitting in the lounge in the dark with a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other, and across his forehead in black vivid are the words "F the world." He even shocks his family one time with plans for his suicide. He's like, during this time, he was so super depressed, he just wanted to end it. And he's like, look, you're going to take me into the woods, you're going to leave me there, and once it happens, blah, blah, blah. This is how suicidal he was. Obviously, he doesn't commit suicide. And so just to provide a bit more context on the situation, he's also awaiting a verdict for a trial in which he was accused of sodomy and weapons charges. The book goes into detail with different accounts. Tupac claims his innocence, and he also alleges that he was set up, right? So he's shot, and he's also having to go to court to wait for the verdict. That's why he was very suicidal. He just wanted to end his life. And so after 48 hours after the shooting, he goes into court in a wheelchair for the verdict, and he is found guilty of sexual assault, and he's subsequently sentenced to 1.5 to 4 years in prison. So moving ahead, he is transferred to the Clinton Correctional Facility in New York to start serving his sentence. And he's just completed his third album, Me Against the World. And so it was difficult preparing for its release. How can he promote it, right? He's in prison. He can't give interviews. He can't make music videos. And so Tom Wally from Interscope Records, he would visit Tupac in prison to discuss things like the track list, the album artwork, release dates. But there were also doubts because Tupac was in prison. And so to release music from an artist who was in prison was not something all Interscope executives were comfortable with at the time. But Tupac prevails. They knew how important and how good Tupac was, and they had to back him. And this is what one of the executives says. I remember being in the room and being in those conversations and thinking how easily it could have gone the other way. The guy's in prison. Where's it going to go? We invest the money, all that. But it was just so clear that he was so important, and this album was so important, that we just got to fight and push through. I remember those conversations with Tom and Jimmy just really like, let's go. And so, of course, they released the album, and the album makes history. It's the first album ever to debut at #1 on the Billboard charts while the artist was incarcerated. Right, never before had a singer, musician, band, or rap artist hit #1 while incarcerated. He not only hit #1, he debuts at #1. And he's in prison. Dear Mama, the album's first single, the song he was telling everyone in the hotel after he just shot 2 police officers to listen to, right? Spent 5 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot Rap Singles chart, and in the first week the album sold 500,000 copies. Now while he's in prison, he continues, he reads, remember he's a voracious reader, and he continues that habit in prison, apparently reading 1 to 2 books a day. And this is what he says: The first 8 months I spent in solitude 23 hours a day, locked down, reading and writing. He later noted in an interview, I've read a lot of Maya Angelou books. I read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. I listened to music, different types of music to calm my soul. Dion Farris got me through a lot of this stuff. Now, Tupac spends a total of 8 months in prison before he is released. His legal team had successfully got him bailed, and while they were appealing his conviction, and so bail was set to 1.4 million, which is an amount that Tupac did not have at the time. Also, while he's in prison, Suge Knight, at the time CEO of Death Row Records, is courting Tupac to come to Death Row, and he convinces Tupac to do so. And so Tupac signs with Death Row and signs a 3-album contract with them. Now, Interscope was all good with this because Death Row was in partnership with Interscope, and so the move was accepted because he wouldn't be leaving. He would still be within the family. And this move was encouraged by Jimmy Irvine because by that point, Death Row had many albums go platinum, which I think is at least 1 million albums sold. And there was an opportunity to collaborate with artists such as Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, and Dr. Dre. And so Tupac is granted bail, and Interscope come up with the 1.4 million for bail, and he's out of prison. And again, this guy does not waste time, right? Immediately after he comes out of prison, he flies to LA and he immediately begins recording, right? Smoking copious amounts, drinking Alizé. The book goes into detail about how he really enjoyed himself after coming out of prison. But not only enjoyed himself, he is working. Remember, he's hungry. Within the first 4 days of freedom, he completes 12 tracks. In 4 days, 12 songs. That's crazy. He recorded these songs for the album All Eyes on Me. Now, I'm going to list the names of the songs he completed in 4 days after coming out of the Clinton Correctional Facility. When I Get Free, Ambitious as a Rider, I Ain't Mad at Ya, Scandalous, Got My Mind Made Up, All Eyes on Me, When We Ride, How Do You Want It, Shorty Wanna Be a Thug, Picture Me Rollin', All About You, Wonder Why They Call You the B Word. He recorded those songs in 4 days. Crazy. Tupac also then collaborates with Dr. Dre to record the hip-hop classic California Love, becoming an international hit and hitting #1 in several countries, including Italy and here in our country, New Zealand. And this is what I mean by Tupac has a crazy work ethic. He's released from prison on the 12th of October 1995. February 13th, 1996, his album All Eyes on Me is released. And that's 4 months. Guess how many songs on the album? 27. And this was at the time when the average song was way longer, like 4 or 5 minutes, right? Today's songs are way less. They're sometimes like less than 3 minutes songs today. He recorded 27 songs in 4 months. In April, 2 months after its release, All Eyes on Me, it had sold 5 million copies. And it eventually achieves diamond certification later on, which is 10 million copies. Only 92 albums ever in history since 1957 have achieved diamond certification. So within 8 years from when his mum sent him to California, this is the success, right? 8 years, he releases an album that reaches diamond certification, right? His mum was like, look, you're failing at Baltimore School of Arts. I'm going to send you to California. Hopefully you can become better, right? Not in her wildest dreams would Feeney think back then that he would be so successful. And so he is one of the most recognized voices and faces in the world. In February 1996, he attends the Grammys and he presents an award alongside the rock band Kiss. He stars in 2 films, the first one being Gridlocked, in a lead role alongside Tim Roth, who just starred in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And this is what Tupac says after hearing that he was going to star alongside Tim Roth. Oh shit, he's a bad motherfucker. I love that cat. In June 1996, Tupac releases, I think, the greatest diss track of all time, Hit 'Em Up. I've been waiting for this part of the podcast for so long, but it's just such disdain, and I've never heard such disdain in music before. It's just because of the anger he is rapping at, right? So Tupac writes Hit 'Em Up in prison after being very suspicious of Biggie and Diddy and those who were at the studio that night he got shot. He reckons that they knew who shot him. He also heard rumors while he was in prison that they had set up the shooting and that Biggie and Diddy were bragging about it. And Tupac was also upset that Biggie released a song called Who Shot Ya less than 3 months after the shooting. But Biggie denies the song is about Tupac and also says he wrote it before the shooting. So you combine that with the fury and the lack of fear Tupac has, right? Remember, he's not scared of anything. His work ethic, his poetry skills, his writing skills, and his masterful delivery. And the result is Hit 'Em Up. And I'm just going to go into detail about the lyrics because they're absolutely insane, right? I would not be doing this podcast justice if we did not delve a little deeply into the lyrics. So his opening, right? We all remember how he opens. He opens with sleeping with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans, but with many expletives, right? He says it in a more creative way. And he also fat shames Biggie. He goes in on Diddy. He goes in on Little Kim. He's absolutely ruthless against Mobb Deep in the outro. He says that one of them, like he says, doesn't one of you guys have sickle cell or something? I had to look up what sickle cell is. It's a blood disease that's inherited, right, which can cause episodes of pain to some organs and can leave you feeling anemic. And Tupac is going for the medical records, right? And he says that if they mess with Tupac, they might have a heart attack or a seizure. I mean, this is absolutely disdain in these lyrics. Then he says, no, it gets worse. Then he says for them to die slow. How much do you have to hate someone to wish for them to die slow? Then he says his 4.4, what I think is a gun, 44 millimeter, will make sure that their kids won't grow. He's going for the kids. All right, I don't know if that's probably is too far. Going for the kids. And then he says, I'll bomb on you mother Fs. And then he ends saying that they're bad boy killers. All right, so, right, is that not the greatest diss track of all time? Of course, has to be. So that's June 1996, and it's a busy year for Tupac. And by this point in time, he is dating Kidada Jones, who is the daughter of Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones is most famous for being Michael Jackson's manager for a period of time. And Kidada Jones is the woman Tupac was hoping to settle down with and have children and start a family. In July 1996, he gets invited to Italy by Gianni Versace, who is the founder of Versace, the famous Italian fashion brand, to walk the runway during the Milan Fashion Week. He's in Milan for the Fashion Week. He does a small impromptu performance in Italy, and he's there with Kidada, right? Not only does he become good friends with Gianni Versace, he is also very good friends with Mike Tyson, all right? Their friendship developed because they really bonded over their similar adversities. And Mike Tyson asks Tupac if he can record a song for him to walk out to for his fight against Bruce Souden on Saturday the 7th of September in Las Vegas, which he does the day before in LA. Tupac then heads to Las Vegas to watch his friend Mike Tyson. So just to note, if you missed that, on Friday the 6th of September, Tupac records a song for Mike Tyson to walk out to. So then he heads to Las Vegas, and this is the night of the fight, 7th of September. Tupac arrives at the arena with Suge Knight, that's the MGM arena, and they're hanging out with other celebrities, NBA stars, rappers, A-list actors, the who's who of American elite. Then the fight happens. Tupac is in his seat watching. Mike Tyson walks out to the song he recorded the day before. 109 seconds later, the fight is over. And I watched the fight. You can just tell Bruce Souden did not want to be there. He gets knocked down the second time, and it looks like Mike Tyson had barely touched him, almost as if he just brushed Bruce Souden's head. And then Bruce Souden does a great Oscar act where he just didn't want to be there. He pretends to wobble, and the ref calls off the fight. And that all happens in 109 seconds. Anyway, The fight is over, and while while Mike Tyson is heading out of the arena, he sees Tupac, right? And there's a video of this on YouTube, and I crack up every time because, like, you imagine Mike Tyson sort of just heading out of the arena, and then once he passes, like, he gets into the concourse after he's out of the arena, into the concourse area where everyone else is waiting, and he sees Tupac. And I'm just gonna imitate for you how he says Tupac's name. He's walking out and he's like, "Tupac," and then Tupac embraces him and they're hugging, and then Tupac's like, "Man, they can't." He's hyping on. It's like, "They can't see you, man. They can't see you." And so Tupac Mike Tyson hugs Tupac and also gives an awkward hug to Suge Knight as well. And then, so they're on their way out. So after Tupac sees his mate, they're heading out, and one of Tupac's entourage, Trayvon Lane, spots an LA Crip by the name of Orlando Anderson, I think in the casino area, in the MGM building, if I recall correctly. Orlando Anderson had, the significance of Orlando Anderson, I'm going to let you know here. He had ripped the medallion off Trayvon Lane's neck at a mall weeks earlier. Now Orlando and Trayvon Lane points that out to Tupac. Trayvon's like, "There's that guy over there. That guy over there pulled a medallion off me. He ripped it off me." And Orlando Anderson's by himself, right? And there's Tupac with his entourage. What do you think Tupac is going to do in that response, right? We already know. Tupac rushes Orlando Anderson, knocks him to the ground. He starts punching and kicking the shit out of him. The rest of the entourage come and start kicking the shit out of Orlando Anderson. Then a few moments later, the MGM security are there to break it up. Then Tupac heads back to his hotel suite, gets ready to head out. He leaves his hotel, then he and Suge Knight head to Suge's Las Vegas house so he can get changed. Then from there they leave Suge's house, and Tupac and Suge head to Suge's club in a BMW. They head to Suge's club, which is called the Club 662, and they're followed by Tupac's entourage and other cars behind them. Suge is driving and Tupac is in the passenger seat. Now they've been driving for an hour because of traffic, and they make a turn down a street, and they get stuck in traffic, and the traffic stops because the light ahead is red. And then a Cadillac pulls up beside the BMW that Suge and Tupac are in, and the windows of this Cadillac are down. All of a sudden, a passenger in the back seat of the Cadillac aims a Glock, or it was either a Glock or a high caliber weapon, pointing it directly at Tupac. Bullets ripping through the side of the BMW at Tupac, at the BMW that Tupac and Suge are in. Tupac tries to jump from the front seat he's in into the back to dodge the bullets. He cannot dodge the bullets. He's shot multiple times. He's shot on the hip. He's shot on the abdomen, the right hand, and his chest. Suge's head is grazed by one of the bullets. He floors it, and he tries to make a U-turn. They make it half a mile in the other direction. 3 of the car's tires are popped, and they're eventually stopped by police with their guns drawn. Not too long after that, paramedics arrive on the scene, and Tupac is put on a stretcher, his clothes soaked with blood from his gunshot wounds. Minutes later, he is at the University Medical Center Hospital. The news of his shooting is spread immediately to his family and friends. They make their way from around the country to Las Vegas, to Tupac's bedside. Once they're there, they see that Tupac is in an induced coma. His head is swollen. He's got tubes from his mouth and nose connected to a machine that is beeping. and his right index finger is missing. Once the news starts reporting that Tupac has been shot, fans and reporters converged to the hospital car park waiting for the news. On Thursday, the 12th of September, 5 days after the shooting, doctors put him on dialysis as a preventative measure because they thought that if his kidneys went, then the rest of his organs would go. The next day, on Friday the 13th, the doctor informs Afeni that Tupac had a series of heart attacks and they had tried to resuscitate him 3 times. Afeni informs the doctor to let him go. This is what she says. "No, don't do that," she pleaded. "Don't do that to my baby. Let him go." At 4:03 p.m. on Friday the 13th September 1996, at 25 years of age, Tupac passes away. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Please keep an eye out for the next episode. Please like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube and Instagram. Let me know what you think. I highly appreciate any feedback that you guys give, both positive and negative. I want to make sure that I can continue to refine the product for my listeners, and we'll talk soon.